10 years ago, local leaders in Ann Arbor recognized the corrosive influence of money in elections.
If we saw a campaign in our community with enormous amount of private dollars being poured into it, we would all be offended. And yet, it would be really easy to do that.
In our own local elections, we put in financial statements and people stand up for who they're supporting and who they haven't supported. And I think all that is reflective of what democracy is all about. So we'll eventually have a false democracy where we'll never know who's really pulling the strings. And I think if cities unite and move forward with this, perhaps more people will understand what's at stake.
Here, I believe the impact is deeply important, but too diffuse for us. It is outside of our local sphere, and so although I'd be happy for my own part to sign a petition to this effect, I'll be voting against the resolution.
In 2010, the U.S. Supreme Court decision in Citizens United established new precedent, overturning a previous decision referred to as Austin. The Federal Elections Commission explains the significance of Citizens United. The court in Austin identified a compelling governmental interest in limiting political speech by corporations by preventing the corrosive and distorting effects of immense aggregations of wealth that are accumulated with the help of the corporate form and that have little or no correlation to the public's support for the corporation's political ideas. Citizens United found that Austin's anti-distortion rationale interferes with the open marketplace of ideas protected by the First Amendment. Citizens United also held that the rule that political speech cannot be limited based on a speaker's wealth is a necessary consequence of the premise that the First Amendment generally prohibits the suppression of political speech based on the speaker's identity. The state of Michigan explains the significance of Citizens United. With the decision, corporations, labor unions, or domestic dependent sovereigns may use their treasury funds for independent expenditures on behalf of state or local candidates. There is no limitation on the amount of money that can be spent, nor is there any restriction on the time frame for independent expenditures. On October 15, 2012, Ann Arbor City Council members Teall, Smith, and Briere sponsored a resolution calling on the U.S. Congress to overturn policy established by the Citizens United Supreme Court decision. That resolution asserted there is a need to broaden the corruption rationale for campaign finance reform to facilitate regulation of independent expenditures regardless of the source of the money for this spending, for or against a candidate. A public commenter offered support for the resolution.
This is a national issue. It goes to the fundamental questions of democracy in our country. Is it appropriate for a local body to rule on this? Is this something that is a local concern? The answer to that is a resounding yes. It is local, and there are reasons why you should act on it. The ruling in Citizens United didn't just affect federal elections and state elections, it affects local elections. The Supreme Court ruled that the Citizens United decision also applied to state and local elections. Now elections for governors, state legislatures, mayors, and local officials will all be forced to allow unlimited corporate money to be spent influencing their outcome, end quote. So it's about you, as well as the rest of us.
Council discussed the resolution, debating its local significance.
I think it's a really really important issue, and it's something that's been troubling me for a couple of years now. The way corporate money can be used in elections to influence elections, right down to local elections, as we learned this evening. And I believe that it's really important on this issue that we make our local voices heard to the broader communities.
For me, taking a position against a Supreme Court decision and calling for a constitutional amendment just isn't part of my job. And I think for us to send this kind of message resolution doesn't have any real impact, and I would just suggest that we stay focused on our job and what we can control. And I think that's what, it's safe to say that's what our constituents want us to do, focus and solve the city issues and challenges and let Congress, the President, Supreme Court do their job. So For those reasons, I won't be supporting this, but thanks.
Councilmember Taylor's next.
Similarly, for my part, although I would be happy and I think perfectly appropriate to lend my name to a message of this kind, I think that the resolution is beyond our local sphere. It has not the sort of direct impact that other messages that we have passed delivered to our legislature with respect to specific local issues or with respect to Congress's funding of specific locally related issues. Here, I believe the impact is deeply important but too diffuse for us. It is outside of our local sphere, and so although I'd be happy for my own part to sign a petition to this effect, I'll be voting against the resolution.
I feel this applies to us because we are elected officials and we do have accountability. This will potentially start to influence our elections, and I think that that is distasteful. I don't like it at the national level. I don't like it at the state level, and I certainly don't think it's appropriate at our level to have corporate influence on who's sitting around the table.
We've all heard about national politics, about the people giving to enormous political action committees, large numbers of dollars from individual and corporate donors, more money being poured into national races for the Senate, for the House of Representatives. All of that seemed like it was quite distant from my life, until I recognized that actually there are no rules now, that it would be possible for someone with sufficient revenue or some entity with sufficient revenue to actually fund a political action committee here in our community and attempt to influence the outcome of an election. That attempt could be made not by hundreds or even dozens of individual donors, but by one or two people who could afford the literature, the advertising, the banners that are put up around town, while the individual that was against that position or against that candidate would never be able to match those funds. For me, it's a matter of local equity as much as it is a matter of national equity. And I appreciate the fact that we all want to focus on local politics. We want to make local decisions. We want to talk here at the table about things that influence our local lives. But I've become convinced that, frankly, this does influence our local lives. That if we saw a campaign in our community with enormous amount of private dollars being poured into it, we would all be offended. And yet, it would be really easy to do that. We talk as it is about how many people or how much any given entity has given to one candidate or one campaign or another. We imply, as a community, that one or another elected official is corrupt as a result of money they might have received from somebody who might have come to the council or come to the county commission asking for support or a change in the rules or that they give money to the homeless. Frankly, if we believe that we are corrupt, that becomes an issue. But if other people believe we are potentially corrupt, that's a much greater issue. I support this because I think it helps us clarify our own goals to not be seen as being bought and not have other people see running for council as an opportunity to buy an election.
The resolution was ultimately approved in a 7-3 vote. Then council member, now Mayor, Christopher Taylor, joined council members Higgins and Lumm in voting against it. For more information about Ann Arbor City Council, visit A2Council.com. Like and subscribe if you want to be alerted to more updates like this one.